very special author interview with Kim Dower, Poet Laureate of West Hollywood. As all of my listeners on the radio program know, I love poetry. And so it is a thrill for me to welcome you. Hi, this is introduction here. I just want to put it up so everybody can see that you are the city poet laureate of West Hollywood
I
back out
was.
a few
Yeah,
years
I
ago.
was.
But it was wonderful. It's y'all once a poet laureate, always a poet laureate. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Oh, PatZi, it's great to see you and be on your show. This exciting new venture, right?
It is. It is. It's
Yeah.
so exciting for me because I celebrated the ninth anniversary of Joy on Paper, the radio program on St. Patrick's Day. And I decided, what the heck? I'm going to do something really exciting for the anniversary. And I launched this YouTube channel because
Very
I
nice.
want, in this day of AI, I want viewers and listeners to actually see the people behind the books and to know they're real. And you are
Yeah.
very real. You've been on the program many times reading your poetry, which I love, and which also the Washington Post loves, because I love this when they say, again and again, this crafty writer invites you in for a casual chat and then wallops you. I love that. This fantastic collection revolves around quotidian details of domestic life, but existential questions are always lurking beneath the surface. And that really describes you.
Well, thank you. When I saw that review from Ron Charles in the Washington Post, I literally burst out crying. That to me was everything. I could die right at that moment.
I know. I mean, that is such a great thing. I mean, it does explain exactly what you're doing. When you just take the simplest little thing and you can turn it, it's incredible. I find it so fascinating. Uh, so tell us just a little bit about your background, about how you got involved in poetry, so we get a little idea that you're not AI, you're a real person.
I'm a real person. I am. Well, I poetry, I will say, probably has always been in me since I was a little girl. My grandmother, who was Russian, could recite all the great poets, Pushkin. It was she recited them, of course, in Russian. I didn't know what she was talking about, but the music of the words and the ushta, ushta, and I was mesmerized. She was a little tiny thing, like 4'10", and had a bun. And I think that poetry has always been a part of my life. And then I loved reading poems to my dolls, and they were forced to listen. So I would write them in my little book, and I would read them. Dr. Seuss, who I loved, and A. Milne. They're changing guard at Buckingham Palace. Christopher Robin went down with Alice. I loved the idea that words could be musical, and so I went off to college, and I took a class called Introduction to Creative Writing with a great poet named Thomas Lux, who's no longer with us, very sadly. It was a long time ago, but my life changed that first day of class. He declared us all poets. He said, "You're all poets here. You have a job to do. You have a responsibility." And I thought, I don't even know what he's talking about, but I like it.
Well, he, he,
And
he was magnificent. I, of course, had read him for many years, and one of his poems, The Refrigerator, stuck with me
oh,
forever. It never left my head.
PatZi, I can't believe you're saying that. That is a poem that I teach in every single class. I don't, to say teach it. What I do is I read it because I'm so in love with it, and then I have everybody write their version. It's called Refrigerator 1957, and you open the door more like a vault, and inside not much. And then he describes very dull things. It's probably, well, it's 1957, and he lives on a farm, and his mother's not a great cook. And he describes the chicken that's just sort of molting and the pocked peas. But on the shelf, in all its glory, is a jar of maraschino cherries,
I
right?
know.
And it's a poem about the beauty of these cherries and what this simple thing meant to him as a child. And he would never, ever eat one because you don't eat that what breaks your heart in two. I mean, I know the poem by heart. And I
I
have,
do too.
I have everybody in the class take 10 minutes. They're 10 years old, open the refrigerator and describe what's in there. And the poetry that comes out of that is just amazing.
Well, every time I make a pineapple upside down cake, I think of him because it's the only thing I use maraschino cherries for.
Well, that's what a great poem should do, be in your head, make you happy. And so he was a great teacher, and then for years and years, a great mentor. And I would send him poems and he would comment. I was very lucky, but we lost him about 5 years ago. And I miss him a lot, you know.
Well, I think he would be very proud of what you've accomplished.
Yeah, he was around to see the first three books. So that was really nice. And I think of him when I look at a last line in a poem, and I think, what would Tom say? And he'd say, get rid of it. So I get rid of it.
Oh, it's wonderful. What is in that review from the Washington Post is so accurate that you really, these delightful subjects that you pick, just randomly, something will come in your head. I don't know, you're doing something, you're walking, you're talking to somebody, but suddenly one little thing will just set you on this path to write a poem.
Yeah, yes. That's the beauty of poetry. You don't really know what you're doing or where you're going. It's rare that you sit down to write a poem about something, but much more common that something inspires you or catches your interest, or if you're overwhelmed by a feeling, by something you read, and you sit down to write about that, and it becomes something totally different. It goes in another direction. It's what we call, the surprise. Where's the surprise in the poem? Where's the turn in the poem? And we don't know where the turns are coming from.
But
So,
when you're writing poetry, I mean, people always get afraid. Of course, during the pandemic, I couldn't do it, but I used to go before that to a lot of writers' meetings where people were just starting writing, a lot of library groups. And I would always tell them, write, write some poetry, just exactly what, it, it gets you inside your head. You start thinking about words and the value and the importance of each word.
yes.
And people are saying, "Oh well, I don't know if it's A B B A B C." I say, you don't
Well,
have to know that.
no, it's
Write from
sad.
your
It's
heart.
sad. People have been traumatized by learning poetry. It should be the most fun thing that you're doing. But we've been taught it's a very serious form. We've been taught poems that are very difficult to understand. They're not fun. You know, uh, it's too bad. I once taught a class of fifth graders when I was poet laureate. I went to the schools, and those kids, they're open for anything. They're just having a blast. And I gave them a little prompt: write me 5 sentences, three are true and two are lies. And oh, the things they came up with, and they're just so imaginative, and they're not afraid. You put a bunch of 20-year-olds in a class, and I was traumatized by a poetry teacher, not Tom, but someone who was trying to get us to read The Wasteland and would say, what does this mean? What does this mean? And like, I don't know what it meant. But poetry, there's poetry for everyone.
I
You
think I
know,
had that teacher because I had a teacher like that. I mean, it was really terrible because exactly you lose the joy of it if you have to break it every word apart. It's one
right.
thing to understand the concept, but when you read a poem like Daffodils, and I mean, he might have worked days, we're rewriting ABAB. He didn't care. He wrote what was in his heart.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you get more into it, it's fascinating to understand
What
what
works?
how people see a poem, and like I love Frank O'Hara. And one of my favorite poems is The Day Lady Died, about Billie Holiday dying, and he sees the headline on the Post. And it's a beautiful poem, and I love it. And I decided one day to Google The Day Lady Died by Frank O'Hara. And there's volumes written about what this poem means and what he meant by this and what he meant by that.
I
And I
know.
thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, I never saw, I'll tell you, the greatest thing that ever happened to me as a poet is I have a poem called Bottled Water that it's a very popular poem. And it's I go to the liquor store and there's all these different bottles of water to choose. Do I choose this water or that water? I can read it if you want. But Garrison Keillor did it on his show, and which was the greatest way to get your poetry out there. And sadly, he doesn't have the show anymore. It was amazing for poets. But anyway, an 11th grade honors teacher, English teacher in Michigan, gave that poem to her students. And they all wrote me saying, did you mean to be funny here? Or was this serious? Or what? And they really wanted to understand what I meant in the poem. And I did a phone call with the class and talking about it. And that was magnificent.
Well, do you have it there? Since you're talking about it, do you want to read it? I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Sure. I will read it. What did I do with it now? Bottled water. Um, I don't want to waste your precious airtime here. Bottled water. I go to the corner liquor store for a bottle of water. Middle of a hectic day, must get out of the office, stop making decisions, quit obsessing. Does my blue skirt clash with my hot pink flats? Should I get my mother a caregiver or just put her in a home? And I pull open the glass refrigerator door. I'm confronted by brands: Arrowhead, Glitter Geyser, Deer Park, Spring, Summer, Winter Water, and clearly the bosses of bottled water, real water, and smart water. How different will they taste? If I drink smart water, will I raise my IQ but be less authentic? If I choose real water, will I no longer deny the truth, but will I attract confused, needy people who will take advantage of my realness by dumping their problems on me? And will I be too stupid to help them sort through their murky dilemmas? I take no chances. Buy both of them. Sparkling smart, purified real. Drain both bottles. Look around to see, is anyone watching? I'm now brilliantly hydrated, both real and smart. My insides bubble with compassion and intelligence as I walk the streets with a new swagger, knowing the world is mine.
Oh, it's a great. It's just beautiful. Well, that's exactly why I love your poetry. It takes an everyday moment and turns it into magic. And you are smart, and you are witty, and you are very bubbly. And so let's talk. We'll talk about each of your books. Well, some of your books. Let's talk first about Slice of Moon, so you can tell us a little bit about what's in it, and then we'll read a poem from there.
Well, Slice of Moon, is a mixed, there's a lot of different poems, different kinds of poems. I started to do books that had more of a through line. Like I wore this dress today for you, Mom, about my mother and her dementia and growing up with her and having a son. So I like the idea of all of those poems under one heading. Slice of Moon has very different poems in it. Some are funny, some are meditative. There's a lot of funny poems, but Slice of Moon, the title poem, is sort of a meditation. And it's one of my favorite poems because I don't write a lot of poems like this. My poems are more narrative and they're more stories like Bottled Water. So I'll read you Slice of Moon. It's a quieter poem. And if you've gotten up in the morning and you look out at the sky and there's just a little frail, pale moon that's still up there, I always thought about why didn't it go away? Why is it still there? So there's a slice of moon left over in the sky. A sliver of carnival glass wedged into the milky blue, as if the gods had a midnight party, couldn't finish it all, left a piece of moon for us, barely throbbing in the morning light, a crescent of white hanging from the sober sky. Why is it still up there on this new day? Its job to taunt darkness, burn through the night like heaven's candle, igniting our dreams, should be over. Why does this moon persist? The sun sets as it's meant to, leaves the sky gracefully, falling into the arms of the ocean. We can trust it to disappear so the sky can darken, so we may rest, rocked by the pale memory of motion, rocked by the song our mothers sang or never sang.
Wow. I love that one. It's really it each of your poems has there's a majesty to some of these poems where you bring in the ocean, you bring in the moon, the sun, the stars. It's just magical.
Thank you.
Another of your books that I, I really like, and I love the cover too. I remember telling you about it. I think this was the first you were on my radio program with this book, and I just got a kick out of it. And well, the whole book is wonderful, but this one, sunbathing on Tyrone Power's grave. I remember when I got it, and I said, "Oh, what is that?" I love Tyrone Power movies. If there's an old movie and I'm looking for an old movie, I'll watch one of his movies because I really like it. So tell us
Uh,
a little background about this book.
well, when I first moved to Los Angeles a long, long time ago, my goodness gracious, so 40 years ago now, from New York, I've lived here my whole life basically at this point. There is a cemetery called Hollywood Forever. It's in Hollywood, and I would explore all the different places. Now that cemetery is um, all dressed up, and they have movie night there, and it's very taken care of. But back then, it was sort of falling apart, and you could just walk through the cemetery, and no one was there. No one really cared what you're doing, and there's a lot of movie stars there. So I found this gorgeous marble slab, and the swans are floating around it, and there's flowers, and it's Tyrone Power's grave. And I thought, wow, Tyrone Power. I used to watch movies with my dad, old Tyrone Power movies with him. And I laid down on that. It was those days when you could still sunbathe. I'm paying for it now, but I would literally go in a bathing suit, put my towel down, and sunbathe on Tyrone Power's grave. And at the time, I wrote a little piece of paper, and this is a true story. I wrote on a note card, sunbathing on Tyrone Power's grave. I'm going to one day write that poem. And I put it in the pocket of this jacket. And I forgot about it. And years later, I'm finally getting rid of all these clothes I don't want. And I reach in the pocket, and there's a note, sunbathing on Tyrone Power's grave. And I thought, wow, that is a great title for a book. And I've got poems lined up. And there you have it.
And it is wonderful, and it's so funny. Uh, Mentioning this, the cemetery. They have movie night at the cemetery.
They do. It's, things are so different now in Hollywood. And so they put a huge screen out, and they play a lot of old movies, and you can go there with a picnic and bring chairs. I mean, I've never been, but yeah, they use that cemetery for all kinds of things. But
Well,
there
I
you
guess
are.
I guess Tyrone Power and some of the other actors are all dancing around there while their movies are being played.
I hope so.
I hope so. Well, of course, my favorite poem from that book is the next one.
All right, so this poem's called Thirst. My father never saw my house, though without his modest savings, we never could have bought it. My father didn't know his grandson past the age of 10, but today at 28, my boy has his eyes and many of his talents. My father died thirsty. We couldn't fill his needs. No one could. He had a big personality, my mother would say, sucked the air out of a room, needed you to pay attention to his every word. A wall of talk we wanted to jump over. My father could tell a good joke, do the accents, had the timing. Why wasn't that appreciated? He could sell anything, untangle a knot out of the most delicate chain. His stuff looked nice, his paintings framed. He'd serve pats of butter on a dish, restaurant style. Our people leave us, and we let them go. They fade into the tapestry of the dead, an occasional memory slapping us in the face, tapping us on the shoulder, kissing the breeze by our cheek. We wait for the wind to blow these reminders, like it did for me today, just now, in my garden that he never saw, but would have loved, even though my roses are struggling, their white petals dropping. So thirsty they are, so ready for a drink.
Wow. When people read a poem like this, I think it's so good for them because they'll stop, they'll read this poem, and I'm sure they'll go back and read it again. But at the same time, they'll be thinking of their own father, and they'll be wondering, what should I say? If he's gone, what what should I have said? And if he's not, maybe there's something I can say now, something to connect me. That's why writing poetry and reading poetry is so valuable. It puts ideas into your head, it brings you thoughts that perhaps you hadn't even thought about thinking. You look at a dish of butter on a table in a restaurant, and something as simple as that re- brings back memories. It's so beautiful, and that's why I think people should write poetry. Don't have to worry about ABC or anything else. Just write the poetry, write it from your heart like you do, and it all works out.
Well, sometimes it works out, but I think that what you're saying is that it's a form that people can explore and not be afraid of, and one that really helps bring thoughts to the forefront. Poetry is the explanation of things that we can't understand. It helps us to give form to things that are difficult. And this particular poem really did come to me while I was watering my roses. It's one of those poems, it doesn't happen very often, but I started to feel the words come through me. Um, Anne Sexton used to say that she doesn't write the poems come through her from God. And I don't think she was religious, but she meant that in the way that she would sit down and the lines and the words would come through her in a way that she didn't even know where it was coming from. And I, with this poem, I just thought my father was thirsty like these roses. And I started writing the poem in my head, and I had to literally run upstairs. You have the picture here to my poetry palace. I had to run upstairs and just get right on the computer because it was coming to me so quickly. I didn't want to lose it. And the poem is one of my favorite poems, this poem.
Well,
It's
it
yeah,
comes from the heart, that's for
it
sure.
does. It comes
Definitely.
from the heart. And I wish my father could have read it. My father, he's a gentleman from World War II, and he was an artist, but he had a day job selling in the garment industry in New York. He'd never read poetry in his life. I went off to college. I went to Emerson College after that first semester with Thomas Lux. I came home with all these poems, and I showed him a couple of them. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, "Well, I don't understand these poems, but I know they're good."
Oh, that's a father. And then let's talk about this wonderful book. I wore this dress today for you, Mom. It's a
Yeah,
wonderful book. And we're
thank
going to
you.
have two poems from this book because they're great.
All right, whatever you
Okay.
say.
All right. Of course, we'll start with the title poem and maybe give a little explanation first.
Yeah, again, this was a poem that was prompted by, it was Easter Sunday. I'm not religious in any way, so there was no place to go on Easter Sunday, but it's always had a huge meaning to me because I am a New Yorker, and I'll read the poem and you'll see. But it's a day that I used to go someplace with my mother. She always used to buy me a new dress, and we would go. And that morning, I put on a dress and I sat at my computer and I thought, I wore this dress today for you, Mom. That's what I thought of, and it was my prompt, and I wrote this poem. I wore this dress today for you, Mom. Breezy, floral, dancing with color, soft, silky flows as I walk. Easter Sunday, and you always like to get dressed. Go for brunch. Maybe there's a good movie playing somewhere. Wrong religion. We were not churchgoers, but New Yorkers who understood the value of a parade down Fifth Avenue, bonnets in lavender, powder blues, pinks, hues of spring, the hope it would bring. We had no religion, but we did have Noodlekugel, grandparents, dads who could fix fans, reach the china on the top shelf, carve the turkey. That time has passed. You were the last to go, Mom, and I still feel bad. I never got dressed up for you like you wanted me to. I had things to do. But today in LA, hot the way you liked it, those little birds you loved to see flitting from tree to tree, just saw one, twig in its mouth, preparing a bed for its baby, might still be an egg. I wish you were here. I've got a closet filled with dresses. I need to show you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your mom.
Oh, well, let's see. God, I suddenly felt very sad. Isn't that weird? It's been, I think, 12 years since she passed away, but she was a character. She was a New Yorker, born and brought up in the Bronx, then moved to Manhattan. She was she had all these fantastic jobs, assistant to this person, that person, political jobs, sort of glamorous jobs. My father brought her all these great clothes from the place where he worked. She always looked amazing. But like all our mothers, there were difficulties, and uh, it was very hard to separate from someone with such a strong personality. And that was a challenge for me. So there were a lot of difficulties when I was a young woman. But she was always there. She was always kind to me. Uh, and she was around until my son was in law school. So we all got a good deal there because they adored each other. And my mother was very proud of me.
I'm sure. I think you had a grandmother too, right? That was interesting.
Yeah, we were so lucky back in those days. You can't do that now, but we lived on Central Park West when it wasn't that fancy. It was just an apartment building on Central Park, but it was across from the park. It was across from the playground. And lucky us, we lived on the second floor, and my grandmother lived on the third floor. And by the time I was 3, I was walking up the steps to her apartment, and I spent a lot of time with her, slept over at her house a lot. Very, very lucky. And then we moved several blocks away when I was in the first grade, but we were still, in the same neighborhood, Upper West Side of Manhattan. And those were good times. I don't for a minute not know how lucky I was to grow up there in the 60s. An amazing time to be a New Yorker. And um,
Well,
it's not like,
it was
yeah,
very vibrant, that's for sure.
indeed.
And you mentioned your son, and in this book you write a very beautiful letter to your son. So Do you want to read that one?
Sure. And then we might need something funny because I'm getting sad.
Yeah, I
You know,
just realized that. Well, we
well,
have
well,
plenty of
well,
time.
we'll find a funny one. I have, anyway, Letter to My Son is a prose poem, meaning there's no line breaks, no stanza breaks. It's a block of prose. And this, again, came from a very heartfelt place, one of the more autobiographical poems in the book. It's called Letter to My Son. Dementia runs in my family. So if I can't think of a name or a place, a moment everyone else can vividly recall, I feel afraid, useless, ashamed. You see, I don't want anyone to carry me into another room so I can get a view of a tree, or remind me what a tree is, or tell me what I'm sipping from is called a straw. I've seen it all before. My grandfather didn't know he was eating a banana, only that someone had to peel it for him, and that thing, that peel, had to be thrown away. I'm not saying it's certain I will have dementia, but if I do, please know this. I won't be mad if you don't take care of me. I won't even know that you're not. Tell me everything's okay, and I will believe you. Tell me there's a bird on a branch outside my window, even if there is no window, and I will imagine he's singing to me. Once, when a storm was coming, my mother looked up at the sky, told me God was punching the clouds to make the rain pour out. She never even believed in God. The point is this: I may not know exactly who you are when you come to visit. I may be confused, but when I hold your hand, it will all come back in waves, rocking you in my arms when you were a baby, your little seltzer voice, my heart flooding my body with joy every morning you jumped on my bed. I will not be angry like some people with dementia can get. I've never been good at angry. I will not peel the yellow paper off the wall or bite my caregiver. Play a few rounds of blackjack with me, you deal. I will smile each time I get a picture card. Tell me I've hit 21 even if I bust. Use real chips. Have party drinks with ice that clinks. A cocktail napkin with which to dab my lips.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, Kim. It really is. And
Thank you.
it says so much. And you're right. We need a funny one. So think of your funniest one right now.
We need a funny one. Well, can I read boob job?
Oh, well, why not? It's pretty
I
funny.
mean, it's funny, but I think it's one of those that the Washington Post is referring to because there's a turn in it, and you think you're going in one direction, and then you're not. So it's not all funny, but it's pretty funny. I mean, um, I don't know if your audience will recall, or if you even know there was a store called Loman's. Do you remember Loman's?
No.
Well, it started in New York, but then it went all around the country. But Loman's was this great store where they got seconds. They got designer clothes, but they got seconds. So maybe there was a button missing, or the zipper was a little jagged, but you could get like $800 dresses for $29.99. But you had to go into a dressing room where everyone was together, and everyone got undressed together. And I used to go to Loman's just for fun because it was the greatest place to go. You could find a great bargain, and you get in really weird conversations with people. There's no more Loman's. Store's closed. It's all gone. Very sad. So I used to go to Loman's with my mother a lot. So this book, it's I wore this dress today for you, Mom, and it's boob job for my mother. Trying on clothes in the back room of Loman's, a stranger invites me to feel her breasts. A stranger trying on dresses that don't fit and I can see her breasts are larger than they want to be. And she can see I'm watching, asks me to help zip her up, and I struggle to pull her in, smooth out her sunburned skin, tug, ask her to shake herself in. She tells me she just got them. Didn't know they'd come out so big. Isn't even sure she likes them. Not even her husband cares. He's not a breast man, she says. He's an ass man. But I'm not going to get an ass job. Good, I say. Because how do you even get an ass job? Do you want to feel them, she asks. And I do. So I do. And they feel like bean bags you toss at a clown's face at a kid's party. I squeeze them both at the same time, cup my hands underneath them. She says, go ahead, squeeze some more. It's not sexual. Aren't they heavy? I don't want to have them around every day. Her nipples, headlights, staring into the dressing room mirror, red scars around their circumferences, angry circles I want to run my finger around. You should have seen them before I had them lifted. They were long, drooping points. Couldn't stand looking at them anymore. Can I see yours? So I show her. So small, hers could eat mine alive. Nipples like walnuts. Do you think I should make mine bigger? And there we are, examining one another's boobs, touching, talking about them like they aren't there, don't matter, forgetting how it felt when we were 12 or 13, one morning when they first appeared, sore, swollen, exciting, new. When they had the power to turn us into women, we no longer knew.
Yeah. Oh, it is funny. It is funny. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't expect that one, but what the heck? This is a fun thing about this program. I'm discovering all sorts of things.
Well, that's a poem. When I read that at a reading, I get big laughs from that poem. The first time I read it, I was a little nervous because it was actually at a women's retreat in Santa Fe or in Albuquerque. It was all women, and I thought, hey, I don't know how this is going to go, but they loved it. It's already an old poem, and it has a feeling of being old, in a way, but I wanted to get a little humor in here.
Well, you did. You accomplished that. You accomplished that. And speaking of reading, you like to do those events. Of course, during the COVID, nobody was doing anything, so it must be good that you can start doing events again. I know you go to bookstores and other venues to do readings.
Yes, I love doing them. I love reading to an audience. Sometimes people are very serious, and it takes a lot to get something out of them because they think they have to be serious. So I'll say, you can laugh at this, but I've stopped doing that. If they don't want to laugh, that's okay too. But I do enjoy it, and I have a new book coming out in January. So I'm excited to go out and start reading some of those poems. Very different book. Not a lot of funny poems in that book, but it's a book about obsessive love, PatZi. It's called What She Wants. And it'll be very different.
We read a lot of stories about obsessive love nowadays, so that might be very on point.
Yeah, it might be, exactly.
While I have you here, what classical poets have meant a great deal to you?
I, I can't really give you a good answer on that. I don't really know that much, and it's a big hole in my education. I love poets. I love modern poets. William Carlos Williams, he's not classical, but William Carlos Williams. Edna St. Vincent Millay is one of my favorite poets
Yes.
from the 20s. So there are poets from the 20s and 30s and 40s. But I don't know much about poets from the 19th and 18th century. I've certainly read their work, but I wouldn't say I have favorites. Is that terribly ignorant?
No, no. When one day you'll pick up a book and it'll answer a lot of your questions too. That's what poetry does.
Yeah.
You go through phases in your life. I remember when I was reading Lux, it was one phase of my own poetry. And then Robert Bly was another poet who meant a great deal to me. I loved his performance art too, of
Yeah.
like you do, you perform. And he really performed with bongos and did his poetry. His poetry is so strong, and I love that period. And but I've gone through my classical period too.
Yeah, I will say that my education wasn't as broad as it might have been. So I was immersed in with Tom Lux, who was at the time obsessed with surreal poetry. So we read James Tate, Bill Knott, a lot of the surrealists, and that's the way I was writing, and that's why my father couldn't understand what I was writing about. And Baudelaire, he's one of my favorite poets. So okay, here's someone from the 1800s. I even have a poem called "Visiting Baudelaire" when I went to Paris and I went to his grave, which I could read. It's coming out in the new book. But I didn't have a good education with those poets. So I did learn more about the contemporary poets, like Frank O'Hara, like William Carlos Williams. And I should take a class, maybe in 19th century poetry. And
Speaking of going to Paris, have you done any other pilgrimages to any poets?
no, I love traveling. I just never seem to have the time. But going to Paris was something like so many of us I always wanted to do, but mainly I wanted to go to his grave because I love his poetry and I just wanted to see it. And it was so tiny in this giant, giant, giant cemetery. But I did go and I did sit there and I did write a poem for him.
Oh, that's in
So
the new book. Do you want
yeah,
to read it? You have it?
I
Okay.
can. I
Sure.
have the I have the manuscript here.
Oh, wow. You're in an exciting stage of getting the book done.
It is exciting. So yeah, it's see, look at this. It's my
Ah.
manuscript. Yeah. But this poem has already been published in a magazine, so I can read it. It's not going to be brand new in this book. It was published in a little journal called Book of Matches, which is a beautiful journal. It's called Visiting Baudelaire. Walking miles through ancient air, skinny streets, my head filled with his clouds, like a tick fills itself with blood. I butter my baguette, length of a baton, as I stroll to his grave. Everyone has given me pre-trip tourist tips, where to go, what to see, every friend who's been seduced by Paris, as if we're all in love with the same woman, arguing over what's her best part, how long did she invite us to stay, deep inside. I'm here for a week. My goal to visit Baudelaire's grave. And finally I've arrived, but with nothing to give except an unfinished poem, which I place beside the dried yellow roses, discolored pack of Gauloise, another visitor's engraved leather notebook. There's no place for me to sit and talk with him. The sun burns a hole through his magnificent clouds. And even though he's dead, I'm too shy to tell him how I feel.
Oh, that's great. And too shy to sunbathe on his grave too. So
I wouldn't dare do that.
yeah, he would have been shocked. Tyrone Power would not have been shocked. I think Tyrone Power would appreciate it.
Yeah, Baudelaire would not be happy.
No, no, not be happy. Well, Kim, it's always so much fun to talk to you. And of course, all of the books are available online. Do you want to tell people about your website? They can go there and find out more about you.
Absolutely. Just go kimdowerpoetry.com and there's all my books are there and you can click on each cover and get a few poems from those books. And it's just been really, really special to have this time with you, PatZi, because I don't get to talk about my poetry that much.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on. Whenever you have been on the radio program, I always get wonderful emails from people saying, it sounds so interesting. I need to read poetry. So you are encouraging people by your poetry, you're encouraging people to look at poetry, to think. And I always tell people one thing about a poet, they know how to use words. They can visualize the words. And this is so important for all the would-be writers out there. You have to love words. It's just so much fun to love words, isn't it?
It's so much fun. And, one of my favorite parts is when I'm editing and I'm going over the poem, I can just throw it down on the page in 20 minutes, but then it's hours and weeks and months and sometimes a year or two to get the poem right. And it's getting the perfect word. Is that the word? Best Words, Best Order, a great book by a poet named Stephen Dobbins, talks about best words, best order, moving the lines around, moving the stanzas. It's your own puzzle, it's your own discovery. And that's what makes it so much fun. And the editing to me is as fun as the throwing it down on the page, because that's where you get to be precise. And I will say the use of the computer and Google and synonyms, I've gotten a little lazy, but it's amazing what that takes you into. You look up another word for shy, and you get all these other words which give you all these other ideas, and then maybe, and the miracle in writing poetry to me is if I change a word sometimes, because I want that word to be more precise, more accurate. And then when I read the lines preceding it, it suddenly rhymes. I didn't know it was going to have a rhyme. And then you get that interior music. You've got to read your poems aloud
Oh,
after you
yes,
write
that's
them.
it's meant to be read aloud, and that's why I always find myself reading it out loud to myself because I
Yes,
just love it. In years gone by, before people had all these devices, that's what people did when they got together, actually together like real human beings in the same room. They read poetry in the evenings and they loved it. It was part of part of a really a connection between,
yes.
the poet, the book of poetry, and whoever the poet was, and the people in the room. And that's so exciting. And I'm telling everybody, you can all do that. You have people over, just read a poem. And there are so many poems that are both touching, very strong poems, like Robert Bly's poems. Boy, boy, if you want a really tough poem, you got some there. And then all these wonderful poems where you just, and again, what you're doing with your students, say, open that refrigerator and write a poem about it. People
Yeah.
can do that too. They can talk about their family. What kind of poem would be the right one? You might have a crazy uncle that you want to write a really funny poem about, and then
Absolutely.
a grandfather who was very touching, and maybe there was a sad story behind it. He was in World War II, but that too is a chance to write and to use words and to put them together as you do. And of course, you're award winning. I didn't mention the awards. I know you've been nominated and you've won awards. Do you want to mention anything?
I'm proud of the book that you like, The Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's Grave, won the Small Press Award as Best Poetry Book of the Year a couple of years ago. And that was great. And I wore this dress today for you, Mom. It was a finalist in the Eric Hoffer Award. These are awards no one
Well, in
really
the poetry
knows.
world, they mean
Yeah,
something. So,
yeah, they mean something. But that was exciting. And my proudest thing is that Garrison Keillor, when his show was on the air, he chose over 10 of my poems over the years. And to hear him read my poem is just extraordinary. Anyone can go on my website, and I have a place where it says Garrison Keillor, and you can hear him, you can see the poems he chose. Bottled Water was one, and hearing him read them is,
well, his work was terrific. I listened to him every week.
yeah,
I really missed when he stopped doing the program because it was just so great. And
yeah.
everybody, you can hear those poems and more. All you have to do is go to kimdowerpoetry.com and find out more about Kim and about her love of poetry and how she turns words into magic.
Thank you, PatZi.
Well, it was
I
great
need,
to see you.
I'm going to write a poem this weekend. I feel like it's been too long. I need to write a poem. So
Good.
this has been inspiring to me, and I'm going to write something.
That's great. And
Yeah.
you'll be back here in January when your book comes out.
Oh, that'd be fabulous.
Okay.
I'm hoping this is going to be a Valentine's gift book.
A
So,
Valentine's.
yes, because
Oh,
it's about love and obsessive love, but the poems are about the experience of not getting the love we want returned. and becoming obsessed with someone, infatuated with them, and we don't get that back. And what happens when that happens? How do we feel? And so this will be a book to get yourself for Valentine's Day. It's not roses are red, violets are blue. It's going to be a very different kind of a
Uh,
book.
I'm looking forward to that. So, Kim Dower, thank you so much for being on Joy on Paper live, which is really fun.
Thank you so much, PatZi. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, bye bye now.
Bye.
Wow, that was great. I love talking to Kim. And as you heard, she's really impressive. Her work is wonderful. And all of her books are available online: Slice of Moon, Last Train to the Missing Planet, Air Kissing on Mars, Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's Grave, and I Wore This Dress for You. Mom, wow. Which is, I think, my favorite book. I love that. I love that poem and all the other poems in her book. So check it out and go to her website. And if you want to hear some of the poems recited, more of the poems by Garrison Keeler, and then, of course, get them online. Now, okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this interview and all the interviews that I've been having. There are so many of them now. I've really been having a lot of fun, and I would so appreciate if you would subscribe, comment, like, and share. There are videos for everybody. If you are a writer, you will learn from the what other writers have gone through and their experience and what they share. And if you are just dreaming of writing, you will be inspired and you will discover that many authors have faced rejection, but they never gave up. And if you listen to some of the interviews, you'll see which authors got a lot of rejections and they never gave up. So you can do it too. So if you're just starting off, listen to these interviews and go to my Patreon page. I'm putting up um, the radio interviews from my radio program there, and it's free and there's no charge to listen to the radio interviews. Get inspired and get writing. And meanwhile, please subscribe to this channel and help us so that we can bring you more wonderful interviews with both authors and with people in the publishing world, like Dave Chesson, who is the known as the Kindlepreneur, because he knows everything about the how to upload and how to control your books on Amazon. So please listen to that interview. Again, please subscribe, comment, like, and share. Thank you.